the wreckage, the sources of contamination. Bombs from the air couldn't force the defenders of Leningrad to surrender. Winter couldn't do it. Hunger couldn't do it. So the Germans decided to shell them into surrender. For days, long-range guns hurled ton after ton of high explosives into the heart of the city. The more the people of Leningrad were shelled, the harder they worked. In a rain of high explosives, cut off entirely from the rest of Russia, with only their own hands to depend on. Their determination never faltered. Every day, more people died of cold, disease, hunger. This was Leningrad in its darkest hour. And then a miracle happened. To the west of Leningrad is the Baltic Sea, and to the east and north is Lake Ladoga, 7,000 square miles of inland water. The Finns and the Germans occupied one border of the lake to about this point, and in the south the Germans controlled the lake to here. Between these 2 points was a stretch of lakefront still in Russian hands, but there was nearly 100 miles between this shore and the beleaguered city. 100 miles of what had been open water and was now snow-covered ice. Across this frozen surface now went tractors, sledges, carving a road across the lake. Soon across this highway, from the far side of the lake, poured a stream of trucks, bringing in food, oil, grain, fuel, truckload after truckload of fresh light for the people of the city. Too late, the Germans discovered that they had left one avenue of rescue open. Bombed the road, but the trucks kept rolling, by day and by night. And soon more than trucks would reach the city, for the Russians were now laying a track across the ice. To the heroes of Leningrad, says the inscription on this locomotive as it starts its pioneer voyage. From the far shore of the lake, it brings food, medicine, supplies of all kinds. Across the lake and into Leningrad, this train is but the first of many. Trains that not only brought in supplies, but that could take out the wounded, the sick women, the half-frozen children. All those that needed better care. All winter long, the lake traffic continued. And all through that terrible winter, the men of the Red Army, outside the city, found the strength not only to defend, but to attack. after time, they hurled themselves against the invader, driving him inch by inch back from the city's outskirts. And then spring came. Spring. Outside Leningrad, the snows begin to thaw, and German bodies are washed from their icebox graves, mute evidence of Russian tenacity. The warm breath of spring is felt, too, on the frozen surface of Lake Ladoga, but the trucks continue to roll, even though the ice is melting beneath them. Spring, as it invariably does, comes to the city, too. But spring is more than a new season to the people of Leningrad. It's a new life. The city begins to breathe again. For the first time in months, the trolleys ran. That first day, it seemed that every man and woman and child in the city had to go for a ride. This was life again. Life for the Leningrad children that weren't killed by Nazi bombs or by the horrible winter. Life for the Russian WACs, the women of the Red Army. And for the Russian waves, the women of the Red Fleet. And for the sailors of the fleet themselves, the artists of the famous ballet theater have come to offer entertainment. Spring is here. Summer is coming. And Leningrad is still free. Although some Germans did finally succeed in getting into the city. But under different circumstances than they had anticipated. Yes, here too the legend of Nazi invincibility was shattered. Against the iron will and courage of a determined people. The citizens of Leningrad have proved that generals may win campaigns, but people win wars. By summer of 1942, new posters were appearing in the streets of Moscow. Posters that greeted and welcomed their allies. Allies whose help was already arriving in Russian ports. Allies whose friendliness had sent drugs and food and warm clothing to help sustain them in their darkest hour. But in spite of all this, the staff of the Red Army knew that they still faced the most powerful enemy in history, and that that enemy would attack again. But when this attack came, the whole German strength was to be concentrated on one objective: the Caucasus and oil. The Caucasus Mountains represent one of the toughest military obstacles in the world. Towering peaks rising to heights of as much as 18,000 feet, with only one practical highway traversing them. And Baku, the biggest oil field, is on the other side. To reach Baku, the only feasible military route was along the coast to the Caspian Sea. But the map shows what a dangerously extended supply line this would entail. To make the operation a success for the Germans, the first necessity was control of the northern hub of the rail lines of the area and a new base of operations. That hub was a Volga River port we have come to know well, Stalingrad, named for Russia's present leader, the pride of this generation of Russians, for it was their city, built in their time. With the capture of Stalingrad, the Nazis would have a base from which to launch a flanking attack on Moscow. With one master stroke, the Russian armies to the south would be cut off from help.